Great.
Or recorded. Okay. We live stream this, so hello to everyone on the live stream and welcome. Tonight's speaker is going to be John Gough of Skyhook Interactive. John's topic is going to be next level design thinking, how to stay hungry. I'll just read the description here. The worst thing that can happen to a practitioner in the technology field is becoming complacent with your taste and not knowing it. We've all seen people get stuck in a style or platform and close their eyes as the world continues to move past them. You care about professional education or you wouldn't be here, but how do you maintain the hunger you need and make sure that your taste is keeping up? This discussion is for you. So John is creative director here at Skyhook, my business partner. He has spoken all over the state at least, and is extremely good at his craft. He's also a fantastic speaker and educator, as you will shortly learn, and a fantastic designer, and a close personal friend, and I'm delighted to introduce John Gough.
Thanks, Dylan. So I didn't introduce myself while we were going around because I was waiting for Dylan to say something really nice enough, which I think that worked out okay. So let's do this. So as the creative director at Skyhook, my role revolves mostly around the visual design aspects and the client strategy parts of the work here. I am the manager of the developers, but it's been about 6 or 7 years since I was a developer myself, so I have a little bit of arm's length distance from that. Hopefully that provides for our discussion tonight some interesting context for you, and that I don't disappoint you, and that I'm not going to talk about hacking servers or the other many cool things that we've talked about in this meetup. We're going to talk about design, but first I have some bad news for you, and it is this. There is a 1 in 1,000 chance you're going to die in the next 2 weeks, if I have your attention. This is truly hypothetical. Now that I've told you that, I'm going to tell you that you're probably not actually going to die in the next 2 weeks. But let's say, in theory, that because you walked into this room tonight, you were exposed to a disease. Oops, sorry, didn't tell you that. That wasn't in the email. But because you're here, you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying in the next 2 weeks. So I want you all to think, just briefly, you don't have to raise your hands or shout it out. If I were to tell you that I have an antidote that I will sell you that will cure you of this disease, you have a 0 in 1,000 chance of dying in the next 2 weeks. How much would you pay for that antidote? Round numbers are probably fine since it's just a hypothetical, okay? Got a number? Okay.
$20.
20 bucks. So I have another hypothetical. Let's say that I am standing out in the front of this building, and I say to you, we're running a medical trial, and I want you to walk into this office suite. If you do, there will be a 1 in 1,000 chance that you will die in the next 2 weeks, and there is no antidote. But I will pay you if you go do it. How much money would I have to pay you to walk into the office? Now, the average 40-year-old American has a 4 in 1,000 chance of dying in a year. Okay, so that's like 0.004% chance. And this increases your chance by 0.001%. But I am willing to wager that the two numbers that you came up with were vastly different. Most people, on average, say that they would be willing to pay around $2,000 for the antidote if they were sitting in the room and had already been exposed. Most people say that it would cost me $500,000 to pay them to walk into the room if they hadn't been exposed yet. But why is there a difference? Why is there a $500,000 difference in the value of your life? Because it's exactly the same question. How much does your life cost if you've already been exposed or if not? But it's still your life. It's exactly the same odds. What changed? Well, the answer is the way you frame the question. That's it. And the reason that this is interesting or exciting or even relevant to what we're talking about tonight is that people are super weird and they make terrible decisions on a regular basis. So there's this great branch of psychology called cognitive psychology and behavioral economics. There's lots of cool books that are written about this stuff. And if you want to talk about any of that stuff, I would love to talk to you about that. But that's why I get excited about design. It's because people are strange and they make strange decisions. And our jobs rely on understanding how people are making those decisions and why. Whether you're in marketing or in development or in design, what we're trying to do is we're trying to communicate with these people. We're trying to put our stuff out there and get some sort of reaction, hopefully a positive reaction to what we're doing. And the better we understand why people make these funny, weird decisions that they make, the better we are going to be able to guide those decisions. And I'm not talking about, scary influence or tricking people. I'm talking about just understanding how people work and how their minds work. And why I was able to guess, I wasn't really a guess, that was based on other people's great research, but was I right? Was your number to get the antidote lower than your number to come into the office? Mine was. Mine was 5,000 and $500,000. They got it almost exactly right. I'm very average. I'm a very average person, is what I learned from that thought exercise. So what we need to talk about first, before we talk about staying hungry, is we need to talk about what is design. And a lot of the people in this room likely have identified themselves as outside of the group that they think about designers. There are designers and there are developers. And my position to you this evening, my thesis, is that that's incorrect. You are wrong about that. So hopefully it feels good to be told that you're wrong. You like that? You said you're here to learn, so enjoy. You are designers, and I'm gonna tell you why. What you may not be, and what it's okay not to be, is artists. Art and design are two different things, and sometimes they get conflated and people mix them up, and sometimes designers think of themselves as artists. Sometimes they act like divas, and you think that means artists, and it's different. Art is not design. So art is about, it's about a lot of things. The dictionary would tell you it's about taste, and it's about beauty, and it's about self-expression. It's like in the last 200 years, it's become about self-expression. But it's about aesthetics, mostly. Design, on the other hand, is about solving problems first. And that's why many different groups of people have appropriated that word. So service designers and user experience designers, and engineers are designers, and architects are designers. And sometimes artists call themselves designers. We've got visual designers, which is where people that you usually think of as designers. This is a really cool graphic that sort of explains the different disciplines of user experience design. So motion design, communication design, user experience, computer science, all these things kind of are encapsulated into this really, really complicated Venn diagram of what is user experience design. But the important thing to understand and to remember about design, and this is how you know that you are a designer, is that design is about understanding problems. That's that research phase over on the left-hand side. Applying principles, so things that you know are true, whether it's framing, how people think about the value of their life, or it's hierarchy in the size of 2 elements on a web page. Those are applying principles. And then you make something tangible. You put something out there, and then you iterate on that to make sure to see how good you can make it. Is this the best option? And that process, those 4 steps, that is design. So whether you're designing ball bearings for a new skateboard wheel, or you're designing a call to action on the end of your landing page, if you're following that process, then you are using design thinking, and you are a designer. That probably sounds a lot like your job, whether you're in the business side of things or in the code side of things. You are working on these problems. You are iterating. You are applying principles and finding the solutions. So one of my favorite design gurus is Donald Norman, who wrote The Design of Everyday Things, which is a fantastic book about product design, and one of the principles of the Nielsen-Norman group. So if you're ever interested in like user experience design, that's a great research group that has awesome white papers that are out there for free. Some of them are now kind of old, like 15 or 20 years old, but they still have a lot of application because they talk about, again, these very human principles about how people use computers and use things, and how they understand them. So he says, everyday people are not very good designers. I prefer design by experts, by people who know what they are doing. Everyday people are really good at breaking stuff, which is helpful to designers, right? We need people to break the stuff that we build so we understand what was wrong with the solution that we came up with. And so I haven't heard it in a while, and I'm grateful for that, but I feel like there used to be, and in some circles, there's still this attitude that users are stupid, and users are idiots. Like, I can't understand why they can't use these things that I'm building. And it's completely the wrong attitude, because the things that you build are for these people. And if they don't get how to use it, then that's on you, not on them, right? I guess it really could be on them, but that's the few and far between, right? It's mostly on you. Just accept that. David Ogilvy, who founded one of the very, very big advertising agencies that you're probably familiar with, says something very similar to this. He was having a conversation with a copywriter, and the copywriter said, I prefer to go on my gut. He's asking him, how did you, why did you write this tagline for this product? And he says, it's just my gut. Like, this is just how I feel. And he asked him, would you go to a heart surgeon that said that to you? Would you accept that from a medical professional? Oh, it's just my gut. I feel like that's the best way to do surgery. No, these people have to have background and research and thought behind the work that they do. And they have to go to 10 or 15 years of medical school to become surgeons, and that's a good thing. So the fact that you're here tonight means I'm probably preaching to the choir, but we have to make sure that we are not the kinds of designers or practitioners that are just going always by our gut. That's valuable, but it should be checked and tested and iterated on. So it's really important, again, that you think of yourselves as designers, that the distinction between designer and coder is very, very gray, because a lot of the designers that you work with, I'm going to say this as a designer who has heard this from developers before, probably don't know all the ins and outs of everything that you're doing and the constraints that you have. You were talking about the 1,000 plugins that are out there, and somehow people keep coming up with weird random stuff. That's me. I help them do that. They come to me and they say, hey, how should this work? I'm like, oh, it would be great if it did this. And then your head explodes. Because I didn't know. I didn't know that there wasn't one of the plugins in the thousands that couldn't do that. And so you're involved in that problem-solving process, even if sometimes you feel like you should be involved earlier, like that would help things and solve better problems. You two are smiling. I know you've had that experience before. You are involved in that problem-solving process, because I've had those conversations with my developers before where they come back to me and say, does it really have to be this way? Are you sure? Because if we did it this way, it would be a lot easier. And that's an important and a good conversation. It should never be, now I'm sorry, I'm a designer. You may go and execute my will. No, I've at least been trained out of that. Maybe that still happens somewhere, but my guys don't seem to think that's okay. So how do we work together? In my experience, I've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and my experience has been almost invariably that the biggest problem with working with other disciplines is language. I don't mean PHP and CSS. I mean that the things that you think, the things you think these words mean are not the things that these other people think the words mean. You know what I mean? So our project managers were having this conversation with me the other day, and they were trying to give feedback to our production designer, who is excellent, and she's got this really great design sensibility, and she is really open to receiving feedback. She's got incredible levels of ownership. You can't hurt her feelings. She just wants to do good work all the time, which is awesome. And the project managers are sitting there and talking to me. They're saying, I don't know how to give her feedback. It's not because she's going to flip out when they do. It's because they don't know what to say. They look at her work and they say, there are things about this I don't like, but I don't know how to tell her what's wrong with it. And I come in and I say, well, the problem is that there's not enough contrast in the logo, and that there's not enough space between these elements, and the hierarchy is all wrong. And they say, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. And I said, well, you didn't say any of those things, but they can't. And that's one of the problems, right? They don't have that. They don't have those language like contrast and spacing and hierarchy. And learning these other disciplines' language is going to be the thing that lets you reach across and become if you want to become the unicorn, the designer, the developer, you can do that. If you want to just be a really great version of what you are, then learning other people's languages is how you do that. That's when people start looking at you and say, that guy really gets it. Like, for some reason, he really understands all these other people. Even if you don't, just being able to talk to them is the thing that's going to make the difference. That sounded a lot more philosophical than I was meant to, but speak somebody else's language. So for the next few minutes, I just want to talk briefly about design language. Hopefully it provides some value to you guys, and then we'll jump into the creativity, keep your drive up, keep your saw sharp kind of stuff. So if you look up design principles, tell me all the design principles. There are lots of different people who will tell you lots of different things, and that's not surprising. The ones I am sharing with you right now are what I consider fundamental. My design background is actually in architecture, and then I became an interaction designer. And so there was this book called Form, Space, and Order, and it's like Architecture 101. And this, in my opinion, is a really strong introduction to design principles. And this person, I don't know who it is, they made this website, which is really great, which is learndesignprinciples.com. Nice job on that one. And then they made these really great visuals, which you'll see in a second, to describe different guiding elements of these design principles. So if you go on this website, and I recommend that you do, it will explain these in a little bit more detail than we're going to do right now. But this is just going to be a very brief version of that, because, again, it's important that everybody has this common language so we can talk about things with other people. And even if you never have to work with designers, you're working with your clients, likely, and you're explaining these things to them. And you have, because of your experience, a lot of intuition, that gut, right? When you give language to those feelings, those intuitive feelings, and you figure out why you feel that way, that's what makes you an expert, right? And then you can talk about these things instead of just feel about these things, which is important. So we're going to talk about these four: axis, symmetry, hierarchy, and rhythm. And we're going to go, like I said, pretty quickly. So axis. There are these two kind of concepts in axis that are important. That there is There's alignment and there's reinforcement. So the fact that that all of these elements are aligned on this axis lets you know that they're all part of the same system, right? So they're all lined up, and that alignment matters, right? I don't care about pixel perfect design. I'm not one of those guys. But alignment, those pixels make a lot of difference, because if those are shifted and off, then it's a lot harder for us to understand as people that those are parts of the same system. So this is back to that behavioral economics, this cognitive psychology stuff. All of visual communication is relying on the fact that we are very, very pattern sensitive as humans, as people with sight. This is something that really matters to us in helping understand what's going on. And so if you're following these principles, then you're helping your users understand it. So we've got this alignment thing, and then we've got this reinforcement thing. So this one's lining all these things up, and this one is separating these two elements. So the icons and then content about some sort of metadata about that icon or something. But the fact that they are lined up on that axis helps us understand that they're parts of the same thing. Symmetry, right? Same thing. So the left one is balanced, and the right one is asymmetrical. So this is like Pinterest, and I don't know what that is. It looks like someone's designed some sort of music player or index. And so am I as the user supposed to understand that these things are equivalent in value and all the same? Or am I supposed to be bouncing between them and guided down this page? And so these Pinterest guys are smart, because they have got this asymmetry thing figured out, and they'll know that they can guide me farther and farther down as I just bounce down the page and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. Right? Symmetry. Size and shape and hierarchy. So hierarchy is the one that I think is the big one in our work, right? Because we're trying to focus attention. We're trying to guide people to do things or look at things. And so getting the hierarchy of these things right is critical. So the Pocket app on your phone, the first article that you look at is, or Feedly is the other one that does this really well. That first article that you bring up in a category is really big, the picture is really big, and all the rest of them are kind of small. And so it either has some algorithm or it's doing it randomly, depending on how carefully designed it is that first big one. And so that one intuitively is the more important one. The other way that you can show hierarchy is by shape. There's also color, and there's a number of other things. Any sort of contrast is going to make us feel like this thing is more important than these things. Not because it's bigger, not because it's anything other than it's a circle and these things are all squares. So that's like the Instagram homepage or profile page. It's different, and so it gets our attention. And then rhythm. So the fact that this group of things is the same as this group of things, or that there are breaks in the rhythm, so there could be several of these like this, and then there's a break, and we notice the break, right? That our attention is called to the fact that this stuff is different than the stuff above and below it. And so the fact that it's interrupted our rhythm has called our attention. So design principles. I honestly don't know if you guys are going to use that on a daily basis. I feel like it's important because you work with design, because you are designers, and that your medium, the way people interact with your work, is primarily visual. Even if you're not the ones pushing the pixels the first time, the thing that you produce is on a screen. People are touching or using a mouse to scroll down on. And so if you understand why the designers are getting antsy about the alignment of something, or if you understand why these things matter, so you can say back to your client, I understand why you feel that way, but there's a reason we're doing it this way. That elevates the conversation. This gives you your language. The three other things, these are kind of subservient and much more granular parts of web design specifically that are important. And I'll show you some examples of this in just a second. And the things, I will say this candidly, and I think you'll forgive me, the things that developers get wrong most often are white space, alignment, and typography. And I think it has mostly to do with the fact that you just haven't spent as much time staring at it and wondering about it, picking fonts and like pondering these things as the people in the design chair have. And it's not that you're not as good at it, and you can't do it. It's just that's not where your brain's been. Okay. So when I have to QA stuff and get stuff back from my developers, and they say, here, this is what you gave me, and I look at it and it's wrong in these ways most often. So let me give you some examples. So one of these is the right one, the one that was designed by a designer, visual designer, and one of these is the one that came back from a developer and said, this is done. So thinking about white space, typography, and alignment, can you guys tell me which one you think is the one the designer intended and which one came back? Hierarchy is probably the one. Yeah.
Bottom.
Is what?
The bottom one is correct.
Well, the bottom one is the one that was intended.
Yeah.
So I would say it's correct. Why did you say that?
The line height is off on the headings, and the top one is too much space.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
There's better negative space on the side of the paragraphs, so you get a little bit more of the background image, whereas the negative space on the end, the bookends of it on the top, it's like obscures the image a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Fonts on the buttons.
Fonts on the buttons. There's less padding up here. Right? Anything else?
I don't see anything you're talking about. It looks like the one on the bottom is smaller than the one on the top. That's all I see.
Okay. There's also better line height on the paragraphs on the bottom one.
Yeah, so they're talking about the space between these words. That's the line height rather than this. So this feels a little bit more natural, and that's too big. This is a little bit tight, the line in between these words. And so this is a little bit easier to read on a regular screen, right? This is pretty hard to read right now. The space around the words inside these buttons is a little bit bigger. So it feels, because there's what we would call white space, I know it's blue, but we call it white space. This feels a little bit more formal than this one, right? And so in the context of this particular site, that formal, futuristic feel was important. And so having this button, I mean, that's a fine looking button. There's nothing wrong with it, but that one fits what we were going for a little bit closer. So I don't have any problem with the fact that you can see it. And I think the reason that we're doing this is so you can see the kind of stuff that we're talking about when we talk about alignment and white space and typography, because the problem with this one and the other ones that I'll show you is that when you look at it, most people would look at that and be like, that's fine, I get that. But they'd look at this one and they'd be like, that's a little bit better, I don't know why. And you know now that it's because they don't have language to describe the kinds of things that we're looking at.
It's almost like learning what kerning is.
Yeah, right? Or rivers. You guys know what rivers are in text, or orphans? Once you know, I'm not going to tell you if you don't know, because then you'll ruin your life. Okay, same thing.
Left is much better.
Why?
Line height of the, well, let's see the font, line height of the paragraph and the heading.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a mess.
The hierarchy is also better on the left between the by line and the big line.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a little bit smaller over here, and it's got a little bit more padding underneath it. Right. So it's just all open wide up. You mentioned
Space
line
between paragraphs.
Yeah, the space between paragraphs, right? So there's a readability thing that's going on. If you could see the whole thing, it would be way more obvious. But this is all really tight. It's tight up here. It's tight in here. The paragraphs are tight together, and and this is just easier to read. So I hesitate to say that it's better, because there's a difference between objectively good and bad, and what it's supposed to look like. Okay? But if it's meeting the design intent. So we were talking about designers solve problems. So often the problem that we're trying to solve on the web in typography and design is that we understand that people are trying to consume a lot of information very quickly. So we have lots of bullet points, and we have these short paragraphs, and these really the short measure, which means the number of words in a line on a page. We try and shorten that down, not too much, but there's this magic area, this magic number where if it gets too long, it gets hard to read, and we want people to move quickly, or rather, we understand that people want to move quickly, and we don't want to slow them down. But there are times when you need users to slow down. You need people to take a second and think about what you're doing. So forms are a great example of this. There are ways to design forms that make people move really quickly through them. You know, if it's a contact form and it's just name, email, address, yep, I got all that. That's just off the top of my head. Great, that's easy, and I want to make that super fast. I want to complicate it. But if you're going to vote in the presidential election, I don't want you to do it in 10 seconds. I want you to think about it and actually read whose name is next to the box that you're checking.
You sure about that?
This is not a political arena, and I refuse to engage.
No, I was just,
Yeah. Dallin showed me his, what was the website you found today? I stand with, or
Quiz will tell you who you should vote for.
and he texted me the screenshot of who he got. He was embarrassed, and I won't reveal the secret. I took it and I was embarrassed too. So, but as a designer, you get to make that choice. It's not always about making it pretty, the prettiest. Right? It's about solving the problem. And so again, this is back to knowing. The more you know, the better able you are to say, if we do it this way, it's going to slow them down, and that's good, or it's going to slow them down, and we don't want to do that. So that we're back to why. Okay, last one. This was pretty easy now. This is a New York Times article. It's way better, and it's funny because at this width, it looks like a broken mobile version, right? How many of you have seen one of those where you get it up on your phone, you're like, what happened over here? And I can't even see that picture. What's wrong with you people? You people is often us, by the way. That's us people. But I mean, you see it, right? The spacing here, spacing between the text, the font's too small. This line height is just completely out of control and unreadable. These poor two people are just gone. Alignment, right? So this text doesn't line up with this picture, but it does line up with this text down here. And if you saw the whole article, you'd see that this has also fallen outside of those bounds. And so they've broken the alignment intentionally, right? And so we're back to that symmetry and rhythm. That thing looks different. It's bigger, it's wider, it's got my attention. Okay. Anybody want to say anything else or ask any questions about design or design language? Or
I don't know how perfect this would be, but I'm not a designer. I'm a little more technical in business, but I'm kind of in both realms. But I've done some things with Photoshop. I'm trying to design like a flyer, right? And it took me 8 hours to make something not very big, purely because of fonts. Just scrolling through the fonts in Photoshop for eons, going through each font. I was kind of like that one, let's make it a little bigger. Yeah, now I changed the font, oh, I got it a little smaller. Move it around, it just drove me nuts. That's why I could never be like a professional designer. But I always try to have that back in my mind when I make things. try to make them as clear as possible, but it's overwhelming for me.
You have my sympathy.
Fonts would be a good-
What?
How to pick fonts would be a good conversation.
Oh, how to pick fonts. As few as possible.
I was just
Start with that. Wingdings. Papyrus and Comic Sans are safe bets.
I took a class a few years back on web design, and they were focused almost exclusively on positional, because people's eyes go to a certain area when you read left to right, and there were certain aspects of the design that said if you want to put your most important information here. But it sounds like what you're doing is putting your most important information wherever you want, just making sure that it's hierarchically presented.
So I would say yes and no. So a lot of people are familiar with like the Z pattern of reading, which is actually more of like a print pattern, because it works if you can see the whole page. If you put something at the bottom right of a long scrolling web page, that's not often where people end up looking, right? Most people don't get to the end of the page. And they talk about the F pattern, where people look at the top left and then over to the right, and then their gaze sort of drifts down and along the left-hand side of the page. And that is typically true. But knowing that, you know that user behavior, and so you're able to put your important things or call attention to things along those lines of pattern. Above the fold is a big argument that people have had for a long time. Is there a fold? Does that exist? 600 pixels, whatever. And the reach, I mean, as much as it chagrins me to admit, the research shows that it really does matter. The more stuff you put under the fold, I mean, the farther down it gets, the less people are going to see it. You want people to see it, put it up on the screen that they have to look at first. And so I would say, yeah, I think those things absolutely matter. And then you use these other things to, people say, people in large organizations, big committees, there's lots of politics. We're working with this company right now, and everyone wants their link in the navigation. Right? It needs to be in the front and center. And it's this optometry, this pretty sizable optometry kind of series of clinics, and the HR people think that the careers button needs to be like right in the primary navigation. And it's this argument internally for them, and the poor marketing coordinator over there constantly has this political battle to fight, because she understands that that's not why people are coming to the website. That's not why 95% of people are coming to the website. And it's a game, it's a politics game, because that real estate is precious, and she's worried about hierarchy, and she's worried about rhythm and order, and if they don't get it right, that's gonna be an effect on their bottom line. It's a business problem. So it's a good point. Anyone else? Okay. Let's talk. How am I doing on time, Down? I'm gonna just ramble and go. Okay, I'll just. Mitch is over there just losing his mind. So exciting.
Probably got like 2 minutes down. Yeah.
All right, I probably won't take that long. I want to talk about staying sharp, about how Dallin's introduction to this conversation was, how do we stay creative, how do we stay hungry, and it's critical for us as designers, we know we're all designers, to keep pushing for that next level of capability. And I'm going to show you a video in a minute that speaks to that. First, I'm going to go through these few elements of, in my opinion, what are some of those components of staying sharp. So to produce great work, your work needs to be prolific. There needs to be a lot of it. It needs to be brilliant. It has to be good, right? And it has to be, your work has to be healthy. You can't burn yourself out. And you can't pick just two of those things. So if you're healthy and you're brilliant, but you're not prolific, then you're unreliable. You can't produce. Or if you are prolific and brilliant, but you're not healthy, you'll burn out. And if you produce a lot of work and you feel great, but your work sucks, then you're getting fired. It has to be all three. You've got to maintain this balance of these three things. Lots of great work, but staying healthy. And so there's this book called The Accidental Creative, which turns out to be really great. I think this and Stephen Pressfield's War of Art are kind of my two foundational books on creativity. And just like I reject this idea that design is art, I don't think that creativity is just for people who know how to draw pretty pictures. I like art. I like it a lot. But that's not what this is about. That's not what being creative really is. So there are these 5 things that the accidental creative guy talks about that are components of making great, what do we say, prolific, healthy, brilliant work. Focus, relationships, energy, stimuli, and hours. So his first question is, where's your focus? What are you working on? What are you thinking about? And he recommends that you always have 3 things that you are just thinking about, and you be strategic about this. So is it, learning a particular language, or understanding a particular framework, or knowing that this is all going to JavaScript, and so I have to get into JavaScript. Like, what are you worried about? Write it down, get it in front of you, put it in front of you. And so your focus doesn't drift from thing to thing based on what fire is lighting up your email that day. So if you're driving too quickly, you're going to miss all the good stuff around you. If you're drifting from thing to thing, then you never really are able to make a cohesive understanding of all the things. But if you're being deliberate and you're reaching out and learning something and then coming back and synthesizing it, going out and you're doing something else, and coming back and synthesizing. If you have good focus in that way, then it will improve your ability to deliver prolific, brilliant, healthy work. Are you developing your relationships? So the fact that you're here is, again, yes. You're meeting people. You are trying to establish connections with these people. He talks about forming a core group or a circle, right? And you likely don't have a board of directors for your life, but you can meet these people, and you can make the relationships that you want to have. Find mentors or mentees if that's where you are in your career. I don't know anybody who is better at this than Dallin. I honestly don't. If you want any tips, I would go to him, because he has systematically reached out to people that he's wanted to meet and then met them. And the biggest obstacle to having these relationships is your own personal worry that you're not cool enough or good enough to talk to these people. All of those cool people like talking to people like us. It's actually really cool. So you should form these relationships. This is a huge one. Are you in control of your energy? Do you know when you are at your most energetic during the day? Do you know the things that affect that energy? For me, I am a fairly serious introvert. I need a couple hours of alone time every single day. And that's hard because I have a wife who I love, and I have 4 very small children. And I've got a business to help run. And all of those things are full of people that want my attention. But I know that if I don't protect that time, I won't have energy for any of them. And so it's a balance, and it's been hard to learn, but it's been important for me to know that I have a couple hours every morning before anybody wakes up that is just for me, and I need to work out, and I need to spend a little time writing or reading or doing something that's just for me. Sometimes it's about those 3 focus things, and sometimes it's not. But you learning that for you is going to be the thing that makes that healthy circle happen. You have to manage your energy, and you have to have personal white space. I talked about white space in design a second ago. You can't fill your life or your brain with one particular thing, or even worse, with everything, because then your brain never has time to breathe. Right? If you're go, 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 you're not going to have the energy you need. That's critical for being creative. Are you managing your stimuli? So I talked about this kind of when we were talking about focus. Are you out in the world? Are you exposed to new and different things that you hadn't been thinking about before? Are you deliberately challenging the things that you're reading? And are you curating those things that are coming into your mind? Or is it, is it just Twitter, right? Just whatever everybody else says, that's what I want to read. Yep. Anything you say. You have to be in control of that. And if you're not, then everybody else's loudspeaker is going to control the things that you think, the things that you think about. And finally, are you putting in the hours? But I don't mean this necessarily in the, get in and do 10 or 12 or 14 hours a day at work. You got to do the amount that's appropriate. You got to get your stuff done. But you also have to make sure that you're taking time to have quiet idea time. Are you meditating or praying if that's your thing? Are you taking time to just be with your thoughts? Or is everything that you're doing, oh, I got to get my audiobook in, or I can't have a silent moment. I got to get my phone out because I've been sitting here for 30 seconds and I don't know if anyone's updated their Facebook recently. Have you quieted your brain enough to have that personal idea time? Do you have time for your thoughts, for your creativity? Same thing with unnecessary creating. Is there anything that you're building just because you think that building things is important? There's this weird thing that happens when you build things, not because someone's paying you to or because you think you have to. That's gonna be some of your your coolest, best work that you do. Maybe not the most polished or the most exciting, but one of the things that I like to do a lot is I like robots and I like Arduino and I like little weird code things. And again, I'm not a coder. I don't think of myself in that way. But that's fun for me because no one is ever gonna pay me to do that, and I don't want them to. That's my hobby, and that's what I build just because I like building things. And having something like that, it could be the thing you build on a daily basis, but you have your own little pet project, or it could be something completely different. The act of creating is important to being creative. It's like a muscle. You work it out, it gets stronger. If you let it atrophy, it gets weaker. Okay. Well, this is the last little bit of this. So Ira Glass is the host of the NPR program, This American Life, which is awesome. And even if you don't like NPR, for whatever reason, you think it's boring, you should listen to at least one episode of This American Life. I really don't care which one it is because they're all awesome. But Ira Glass was started out, obviously not as a famous, successful radio host. He started out as a really nobody level, crappy radio host. And by his own admission, he was really bad at his job. So he recorded this little thing, and somebody's put this to typography, so it's this cool little video. And he talks about taste and talent, and that's kind of where we started, right? Does your taste match your talent? And how are you driving to develop that taste? Oh, that link didn't work. What will? I wonder. Probably play through my speakers, and so hopefully it's loud enough. Nope.
Nobody tells people who are beginners. I really wish somebody had told this to me is that all of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good. Okay, it's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer, and your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, you gotta know that's totally normal. The most important possible thing you can do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
My experience has been, and I've certainly felt this myself. Oh, stop it. I've experienced this in my work already in my life, and maybe in 20 years when I've been doing this for as long as Ira Glass has been doing his job, I'll feel like I've caught up. But as I do my work, my taste improves, and that talent is still chasing that taste. And honestly, I'm a little afraid of the idea that it'll ever actually meet, because when it does, I don't know what I'll do with myself. I think maybe this is an experience, but I think that we need to have something like that to chase. I think we have to always be pushing our taste a little bit further than our talent. So there's always something to reach for. And I think there's something really cool about that. I think there's something kind of beautiful about work and about the way it teaches us. This really is an art kind of. It teaches us what is beautiful, what is worth doing, what is better than we did before. So the best news of the night is that you still only have a 4 in 1,000 chance of dying this year. So you're probably not going to die after all. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Any other questions? We took questions kind of in the middle there. Thoughts? Very good. We'll talk about WordPress now.
So how do you sort of approach what I would call responsive design fatigue, where everything uses a 12 6 1 4 script, and you want to be breaking people out of that. You want to be slowing them down in certain places, but because the pattern is so common, like every website, every responsive website looks the same because there's only so many ways you can divide up the pie. How do you approach that, like the grid, and thinking about how to slow people down in a system that everyone uses?
Yeah. So that's a pretty good question. How do you approach design? How do you make something different if you're operating in a system that everyone uses? And I think my answer to that has been in the past, look hard for something new, because I'm not working at the bleeding edge. That's not what people are paying me to do. And there are a lot of people who are getting paid to do that. So you got to keep your eyes open pretty wide. I guess that's kind of a cop-out answer, because I don't have ambitions of being the guy who breaks out of the box. I feel like there's a lot of really good work to be done on this side of that. But I will say that that the grid, and I hear what you're saying about that, but the grid isn't it's not a responsive idea. You know, that's a Swiss idea from 100 years ago. So there's been a lot of great design work that's been done on the grid and off the grid, right? So like people breaking out of the grid intentionally to make a statement or to call attention, right? We're talking about hierarchy or breaking axes. So the other cool thing is that if you have enough money to do it, then you can make everything look different at every grid point. And you can really push it that way. But and I hope it's not a cop-out to say I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do even within the grid that will be surprising and interesting to you, and work within the limits. So Orson Welles is famously said that the enemy of art is the absence of limitation. So I was making some derisive comments about art earlier, but limitations actually, as creative people, help us to focus our efforts. So I guess I would encourage you to say, all right, I have to operate within this grid. What can I do that will still surprise people or still be interesting? Because it's hard to do it from a blank canvas. Anybody else? All right. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for taking the time to listen to that. It means a lot to me.
Thank you, John.
Yes.